Hello, everyone. My name is Lin Huynh. I am the host and founder of Fame to Fame. We're here today with one of the most recognizable and top high school basketball coaches in the country. To name a few players he's coached, NBA and professional basketball stars, Frank Mason Jr., Kenyon Martin Jr., QJ Peterson, Damonte Dodd, Rashard Kelly, and many more. He's currently head coach of IMG Academy, which is a complete powerhouse basketball program, sports program in the nation. With that being said, please help me welcome Coach Chad Myers. How you doing, Chad?
Great, Len. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. We go back in time. I've known you since when you're the basketball operation lead for Radford University. So it's great catching up with you.
Yeah, great to see you doing great things. Really enjoyed the podcast here, and this has been great. So been a long time since then. Less gray hairs for me. So.
And we're just getting wiser. No, I definitely reached out to you. I mean, we've definitely kept in touch since your time from Radford and going to the high school level. But I've seen all the great things you've been doing. You've worked with a lot of key players that's made it to the NBA, a lot of players that's made it overseas, and currently a lot of top recruits that's probably going to go somewhere pretty big in their college days. So I think, with your background, you have a lot of things to share with a lot of folks that could utilize as a resource as they kind of move forward with how they want to move forward with their basketball career. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, really excited to be on with you tonight, Len.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Chad. So before you became a basketball coach, you grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, was a key player out of the area. You went to Shepherd to play Division II basketball. How did that all come about, the sport of basketball, and what led you to coaching?
I always grew up. I just love basketball. My dad was a huge basketball fan and coached AAU. Coached a lot of really good players out of the Roanoke area, Troy Mans, Mark Byington, that's the head coach at JMU now. So I kind of just always grew up around basketball. I was an 8-year-old kid, and I watched Allen Iverson and Joe Smith play for Boo Williams in that state tournament and an AAU. Back then, everybody had state tournaments. And then my senior year, I left and went to Camden, South Carolina, Camden Military, and I really wanted to get a scholarship. Had a lot of ODAC recruitment, not much above that really at the time. And then I actually did a prep year at Hargrave too. So then that led me to Shepherd, and kind of always knew like I wanted to play basketball as long as I can. And, I love the game, but I was kind of realistic to knowing that my path probably wasn't going to be able to play in the NBA, maybe could play overseas somewhere, but had a good college career at Shepherd. Loved my experience there, set a couple school records for made threes and consecutive free throws. And then that actually led me back to being an assistant, like right away at Hargrave for Kevin Keats for 3 years. So it was a great path for me. And I was kind of a unique kid. I think when I was like 5 years old, I always wanted to be a basketball coach. And that was something I always wanted to do. So I'm fortunate to do something I love every day still.
That's awesome, man. You definitely have been through different paths as a player, as a coach, as a mentor. So yeah, I definitely see the value you bring, and it definitely shows. You've worked with a lot of key players that's made it really big into the league. Talking about some of the things that inspired you, was there any like players that you looked up to growing up in the area, or anybody in the league growing up? Was there anyone that you looked up to or a team?
Yeah, in my era, everybody thought Michael Jordan was the best, and that's a big argument now for everybody. Michael or LeBron, right? We don't want to get into that tonight, but
Right.
I grew up, and then my dad actually had a relationship with the Currys, so I was fortunate as a little kid I could actually go down to Charlotte. And my 8-year-old birthday present, I got to meet Michael Jordan, and my dad and Dale Curry were friends. So that was like I just loved going to games and being around. So I loved the Hornets back when they had Dale Curry, but then they had Larry Johnson and Alonzo Mourning and Muggsy Bogues and all those guys. And then just growing up, I would go to every high school game in Roanoke. Mark Byington was playing at that time in Roanoke. Curtis Staples, that went on to be the all-time leading three-point guy at Virginia before JJ broke his record. He was at the same time when I was a little kid. So I would just go to every high school basketball game. Me and my dad would go to the AAU Nationals in Winston-Salem and watch games after games of Ron Mercer and Jermaine O'Neal and all those guys. So I just kind of grew up being a hoop junkie my whole life, and kind of led into me obviously playing and then staying in basketball and coaching. So
That's awesome. I didn't know about your experience with the Currys. That's pretty cool. Do you have any memories of like Steph or Seth, like growing up or seeing them kind of grow up and develop? Do you have any fond memories of them?
yeah, it was such a unique time. I don't want to jump ahead, but when obviously I was working at Radford when you were there, I actually went over and saw Steph work out with Virginia Tech when he came in. It was like West Virginia football weekend, because obviously the Greenberg connection, and Dale would win. And I actually went back every summer when I was at Hargrave. And then actually when I was at left Radford at Massanutten, I actually used to run Del Curry's camp. And then he actually joined in with Jay Billis and ran the camp together. So I think my biggest memories, we were really, really young. He obviously was a little kid carrying a ball, but it was more like when he got to be between the 15 and 20-year-old range. And that's when he kind of turned the corner, right? When he was 15, he was real young and small and kind of frail. And then, so I kind of saw those years, and I would see it from a unique perspective because I would go back a year later for camp and just the jumps he made between 16, 17, 18. And then he was playing it in a pickup game, I'll never forget, before he went to Davidson. And it was Casey Rivers that was good at Clemson, Dorenzo Hudson that played Virginia Tech when we were there, Dee Bost, I had coached at Hargrave. And all of a sudden he was like the best player. I think Anthony Morrow might have been in the game too. He was the best player on the floor like 2 or 3 days. And I was like, I remember telling my dad, I was like, oh, this guy, like, he's not only changed, he's like real good. And then the rest was history, right? He went on to Davidson and scored all those points, and now one of the best players in the league. So it was just very, it was intriguing just to see a guy get better, and you'd see him like once a year at that point, because I would want to see him in the summers, and how much of a jump he would make each year was like really cool to see. So
that's some cool inside scoop right there. Yeah, it's crazy to see. I mean, everyone knew he was a ball player. He grew up in a household with his dad playing basketball, but I think he's definitely inspiration to a lot of folks. He's not the biggest guy. He wasn't the most athletic, but it just shows how hard work and just persistence just kind of leads you to where you're at. So that's really cool to share.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, jumping forward to, like you said, I was going to hit that next was our Radford days. So how we met is that I attended Radford University. You came to Radford as the operations day-to-day lead and actually worked for you. Chad was actually my boss at the time as a student manager. So definitely good times. I'm so thankful to even have this opportunity to talk to you now and just kind of see how our paths cross again. But while you're at time at Radford, reflecting back, what do you think really helped you and propelled you to where you're at now in a sense of the high school ranks? Because you work with some top players now. So what are some things you took away from being at Radford at the time?
I thought Radford was one of the best experiences I had. I had came from Hargrave for 3 years. So when I was there, we were really good. We had 33 Division I players, Jordan Crawford, Mike Scott, Dee Bost, a couple of NBA guys. But at Radford, going to be the ops person, I learned kind of the ins and outs of the business. And I think it's so important and really helped me being a head coach. And Lynn, you would know this. I mean, it became all of a sudden important at the 16-minute timeout to make sure we had like the timeout chairs set up for the guys. I never, as a player and like as an assistant coach or workouts and all that stuff, you never had any perspective of that. Like you realize like how much went into like the film study, how much went into breaking down the film, how much went into getting on a bus and setting up the charter bus and getting the meals ready and making sure the guys were situated and we were getting from place to place and they had all their gear and all their food and everything they needed. And I think I also realized like what everybody else in the program goes through that sometimes you don't see as a player. You don't realize the hours and the time and every single day that we were in there, whether it was 6 a.m. weights or it was late at night after practice or it was, cleaning up in the office, breaking down film, the game might end against High Point at 9 o'clock. We might've been there doing film stuff to 10:45 or 11, and it depends on. So I think, and then just like, how selfless everybody was at work. We were obviously fortunate. I mean, like I tell people all the time, having you and then having B Jack, obviously, and Patrick Thornhill, we were like really lucky to have you guys on staff because when I got there, you guys probably knew more than I did, and stuff. And a lot of it was new to me. So I think that always helps me when I think about it. Eventually wanting to be a head Division I coach, maybe one day, how important your staff is and having people around the program that can help you out. And so I just think all the different lessons outside of just coaching basketball and skill work and player breakdown, all that stuff I learned those 2 years were just monumental to helping me like kind of be able to run a program as a head coach, even at the prep level.
I think that's a good point. I even think about my experience. I work as a government contractor, and there's things that I do day in and day out that applies to my skill sets. But what really takes you to the next level is understanding the business side of things, what goes in and what goes out of it. So that really resonates with me. So I definitely hear you on that because we worked some odd hours at times. There's a lot of minute things that you would not think about. I never even thought about it until I got into that role. So a lot goes into just more than just the players, the coaches, but it takes a whole collective group to make it happen. So I hear you 100% on that.
Yeah.
So now you're at, moving forward, after Radford, you go to Massanutten, help groom and mentor a basketball star right now, Frank Mason Jr. And now propelling even more forward, you're at IMG now, which is probably one of the best, if not the best, high school basketball programs in the nation. From your perspective, and put in your recruiting lens and your lines in, what makes IMG so special? How did it get to that pedigree to where it's at today?
I think IMG is unlike any other place. I think it's really hard to put into perspective unless you actually come visit your own campus. We actually probably have more resources than we had when we were at Radford, which is crazy. A lot of people don't realize that. We have, obviously a basketball staff. When I travel, I have 3 assistant coaches. Like yesterday, just for instance, we went and played a big road game against IMG Academy. We traveled with 3 assistant coaches. We traveled with our mental coach. We traveled with the strength coach. We have another skill development guy that was with us. We have our video guy, so we're traveling with the staff like almost a college basketball staff. So I think that's so valuable to all our players. They have a full-time strength coach. We actually just had a strength coach that left recently that went to work at Alabama football. So obviously we know how great Alabama football is, and they're not hiring guys unless they're really, really good, so they're at the top level. And the guy that's the head football coach there, obviously strength coach that works for Coach Saban and just got hired. He was a former IMG employee. So I think we're very unique in that. The campus life is just so much different. I mean, obviously it's beautiful. Obviously the dorms are really nice. The pools, like the weather, all that stuff looks great. But, we got a Gatorade Sports Science Center on campus. There's only 2 of them, and that's us and the University of Florida. And they can do sweat testing with the guys. Our guys work out with catapults like you would get like a high major programmer in the NBA and actually test like their movement. And then you get to the whole idea of like them having, 4 gyms. We're building 4 more. So they're going to have 8 courts, 6 guns, like all the facilities. And then just guys that have everybody. There's 2 former head Division I coaches on our staff. They're actually our directors that kind of oversee the operations, even above me, So it's very unique in just the resources and the people that I think sets it apart from every other prep school. My first day when I was here, which would have been last year at this time, I just told our guys, I said, look, I've been at Massanutten, I've been at Elev8, I've been at Hargrave. Like, we got no excuses here because we've been really good at a lot of those places, and we didn't have all these resources, even half of them, So I think that's what's so unique. The resources are only good if you use them, but our guys really have everything at their disposal. So, it's really lucky. I wish I had that when I was 18 years old. That's for sure.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I've definitely been to the website. I mean, IMG, everyone knows what IMG is, and it's impressive. Like when you look at it, you forget that it's a high school essentially. You forget that. I think a lot of resources and things that you guys have is something that a top-notch college program has, or if not more. So very impressive. I would have loved to went there too, especially for the weather. You guys are in Florida, so that right there is the snow. Being a coach, what do you look into a player? I mean, of course you look at the, ability, but what else do you look at as a coach?
I think especially at the prep school ranks, the biggest thing is guys that have a goal and want to get better. You mentioned a couple guys already on here. The one thing that all those guys had that have been successful is they had a drive and a work ethic. I think everybody has upside, and you can say everybody has upside, but you got to actually have like some kind of self-want to you, and you got to want to spend hours in the gym. You got to want to spend time. You got to want to be good. And I think, a lot of people talk about potential, but to me, it's almost, bigger and more important, what is that person made of? Like, what is their substance? Like, what do they really want out of this experience? Like, how hard are they willing to work? And then what are they going to do when things aren't going perfect? Because I think that's the biggest challenge so many of these guys get when they get to prep school anywhere. They get to college, and you've seen it as college freshmen that when you get there, you were the best player on your high school team. When you get here, you were the best player on your team. That's how you got here, But now, what are you going to do when there's 7 other guys that are all fighting for the same scholarship and all were the best player on their team too? And how are you going to compete? And that's why I think it's so valuable for our guys moving on to college. They kind of always went through not just the part of being away from home and working harder, but just playing against other competition, fighting for minutes, fighting for spots, and looking at a guy that's looking eye to eye with you that might have close to the same ability or maybe even more. Like, how do you, get on the floor and make the right plays and all that stuff. So I think it's just kind of the intangibles. We're not really going to see guys if we don't think that they're good enough. We probably have an idea. It's kind of like, but who's going to make the most of the experience? And we want to be selective that guys that are great for obviously our team, our brand, and, represent us in a great way. So
when you think about someone like Frank Mason versus someone who does really well but doesn't get to that point, what's the biggest difference you usually see? Is it athleticism, or is it kind of what we just honed in on just now? What's the difference between those type of players, and kind of what gets you to what Frank Mason accomplished, and like Kenyon Martin Jr.?
Yeah. I think those 2 guys are right on the head. I think you got to have like a why and a reason. I think both of those guys just had an unbelievable drive to compete, and I think that's a lot of it too when we're talking about like competitive nature.
Yeah.
Frank Mason really wanted to guard the other team's best player. He obviously got known a lot at Kansas for scoring. He scored a ton of points at Petersburg. When we were playing in games, he would guard. I know QJ mentioned on his podcast is that, he would make guys miserable every day in practice. He really challenged everybody. I mean, he would pick up guys full court every single day of practice. then he would just really like had a competitive nature that you weren't going to get a shot off. He didn't care if the guy was 6'10" or he was 6'1". Like he wanted to guard the other team's best player. And for us, we were so successful that year because he would go from guarding like Terry Rozier at Hargrave to guarding maybe like Karan Iverson at Fishburne. That one of them was 6'2" and the other one's 6'9". You know, so it's like every day he brought that hunger and toughness, and that's what allowed him. He was actually the lowest rated recruit on Kansas's board that year when they brought those guys in. Now, a lot of them went to the NBA, but they had Joel Embiid, they had Andrew Wiggins, they had Wayne Selden. And, you know, a million people said, you know, Frank won't make it at Kansas. And all of a sudden he's the national player of the year 4 years later.
Right.
And then he stayed in the gym. I mean, his one knock was that he wasn't a consistent shooter, and he ends up scoring like 24, 25 points a game. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there was multiple stories at night, even after games, the freshman and sophomore, he would go back to the back gym and shoot on the gun at night after the game, you know, and that's what, you know, that was just his drive to prove that he could play at the highest level and got in there. And then Kenyon Martin really started off unbelievable this year in the G League. He's had a couple, I think I saw today, he's averaging like 23 points, 12 rebounds, and like 2 or 3 blocks.
Right.
And he's done some good things for the Rockets. And I think his drive was almost that people didn't respect him because everybody thought he was just Kenyon Martin Jr. and that was because of his dad.
Right.
So I think a lot of his drive was to prove to everybody like how good he is, kind of like create his own lane, his own path, which is probably similar like the Currys a little bit. And
right.
A lot of these people that have famous dads over great NBA players is that they want to show like how good they are and prove their worth. And he was not rated very high. Like when he came to us last year, he wasn't even a top 150 kid originally. Oh, wow. And then he played himself into the top 50 and then obviously played himself into the NBA draft. Now his athleticism is unmatched, but he added skill. Like every morning he came in and shot a couple hundred shots on the gun every day. You know, he came in and worked on his game. And then when he went to the NBA combine, they had the little combine that they did this year, even though it was changed a little bit. He was one of the top guys in the 3-point shooting percentage at the combine. You know? So that just kind of proves of his work in the last 10 months of like how good he was. And that helped him get drafted.
No, that's impressive. I mean, I was a huge fan of his dad growing up. He was a part of the team with Jason Kidd and the whole crew. When I see him, he looks like a different player, but like you said, a lot of these folks who grew up in that household definitely want to make a name for themselves. So definitely a key driver for most of those guys. I mean, being a coach, especially where you're at IMG, it looks very glamorous. I'm sure there's a lot of parts to it that is. However, there's always ups and downs to everything. What's the toughest part of being a coach?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we talked about it briefly, especially at the prep school level, is everybody kind of came in and they were all good. I think the hardest thing is I compare this to kind of like a Duke and Kentucky in college a lot of times because everybody comes here and they're the man and they're expecting to go to a certain level and they were all good when they got here. So molding those guys to actually play for a team goal is the first challenge, and then kind of showing them that if we win and we play the right way and we share the ball, it can actually not only become easier, but we all get judged as winners. You know, and I think that's kind of in life. You know, I think that's if you get a bunch of talented guys and you win, then obviously you're considered winners. If you get a bunch of talented guys and you lose, then obviously not only are you considered losers, everybody looks for like, you know, what's wrong with those guys? What's wrong with that team? Who's the problem? So I think the biggest challenge is always getting guys to come in and then obviously be able to share the ball with each other, be able to play the right way. So we just really try to like talk about, hey, like we have a goal to win a national title every single year. You know, we have a goal to make the national tournament, which I've been fortunate to make every year. And then obviously individual goal is to get a scholarship. You know, the way you get a scholarship is to win more games and play the right way and be seen by college coaches doing the right thing. So we never really set a goal of like, we need a guy to be an 18-point scorer or somebody do that. Like we never talk about individual statistics. We just talk about like our team and then our individual goal, which is gaining the scholarship and playing at the highest level you possibly can. So, but I think that's the challenge because everybody was the guy with the ball in their hands at the end of the game and made the play, you know, whatever else. So now you got to get those guys to, you know, play with other guys. But you know this, that whether you're going to the NBA like Kenyon Martin or you're going, we have 2 kids this year that already committed to Syracuse and LSU. Like the chance of you having the ball in your hands every play as a freshman or like the first year in the NBA or the G League, whatever Kenyon Martin's doing, you know, that's not what's going to happen. Like you got to be able to play with 4 other guys at that level. So I tell our guys, you kind of have a cheat code because you're learning what you're going to do next year and you'll be ahead of everybody else when you get there.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point because even when I think about it, I'm just like a lot of people when they see like Kentucky or teams like that, they're like, oh, they're going to win. Look at all the talent they have. Rightfully so, you're probably right. But at the same time, I think about how tough would that be being that coach of trying to manage all those personalities, those egos. And if you lose a game or 2 games, you're going to look really bad because the expectation is so high up. So I definitely hear where you're coming from. And yeah, I think it's even, I sometimes wonder, is it better to be in a position where you have a team where there's no expectation, or you have a full of guys who your expectation is really high?
No, I think, I mean, I would rather have the good players, right, and have the
Yeah.
target on your back than not, but there's definitely something about the underdog role. Then you talk about, in high school, it's kind of like Oak Hill. Oak Hill's had that
Right.
forever. The other thing is I think people take for granted, I tell our guys is, hey, like we have this year, we got 4 guys in the top 100 in ESPN. And our point guard just committed to Dayton. He's not one of those. And we got another kid with a Marquette offer. So like every time we step on the floor, we're going to get everybody's best shot,
Yeah.
because one is who you guys are, and two is like who we are as a brand in the school. So
Exactly.
that's something you got to prepare yourself for too. And people take it for granted. Like if you're, like you said, Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, you're getting everybody's best shot every night. So you got to be ready to play. I mean, we were fired up for the first start of the game too, and we went in those places at Radford. Now, about 10 minutes in, maybe not the same, right? We were ready to go. We got
right.
but,
No, that's cool. I mean, you've been around a lot of basketball. What's some top memories that you encountered, like an experience as not only a player but as a coach?
Yeah, I think obviously it was really cool as an 8-year-old to start off kind of from the front. Meeting Michael Jordan and being there, and being able to be around like the NBA guys with my dad and the Currys.
What did it say to you? Do you remember anything that you guys discussed, or any takeaways from that?
Yeah, it was actually really funny. So I got one real memory besides the bad sweatsuit I had on. We won't share that picture, but it was like a Converse sweatsuit. But no, like Michael was actually coming in and he was yelling for like security. And at that time, like nobody knew what was going on. Obviously, he was famous. I think this would have probably been like right. They had just 8-year-old birthday, so it's probably like right when they maybe won their first championship. So obviously they were like a big show, right? Everybody's coming. He's from North Carolina, and he's yelling for security. And then all of a sudden he had grabbed like Muggsy Bogues, and he starts yelling in the arena like somebody's lost their child, because obviously Muggsy was like 5'3". So that was like that was the funniest part of the whole thing, and that was like, so it kind of like lit the mood for everybody. Everybody was laughing, so I was like, I remember that part. And then I just remember, meeting him, and it's kind of, I was real quick, I was young, but then just being at the game, everything he does when he walks out, just it being a circus, it's kind of like we saw in the Dream Team thing. Like, there's a million people following him, people taking pictures, and just imagine like doing that, for all those years and all that stuff. So that was really cool. As a player, I think setting a couple of records in college was like really obviously awesome, because you work so hard to try to have a good career. And I wasn't a guy that grew up as like the man, like I had to work really hard and like work on my game and spend extra hours in the gym and try to raise my level even to get to Division II.
Right.
So I think, being able to actually finish, your end of your playing career, and I made like 9 threes at West Liberty, and I made 37 consecutive free throws at Shepherd, and being able to set records at places people didn't even know if you could play at. And then coaching side, winning a national title at Hargrave as an assistant was something you always like will remember. And it was the only team in the history of the school with all the NBA guys that went undefeated. So that was like really cool. And we won that at Fordham. And then being at Radford that year, just us being able to go in, like we played at Duke that year. We played at Kansas, Louisville, just stuff you dream of, you're in your 20s. And I think we take everything for granted at that time. If you're playing at Allen Fieldhouse, you're going to Louisville, you're playing in Cameron Indoor. Like those are just experiences that like everybody takes for granted when you're in the moment. And right, we were worried about like the meals and stuff, but being able to do those things were really cool. And then I always think about it now, like I've won like close to 250 games, and like our record so far is 50-3 at IMG since I've been here. So I think just like being able to coach these guys, I was trying to like work on recruiting stuff the other day, and I've had like 80 guys play Division I that have played for me. So just like when you take a back seat and see that, just how fortunate you are. But probably the most memorable 2 moments, for like not to keep going on,
no, this is good. This is good to hear.
Luke Hancock got MVP of the Final Four. So I used to work out Luke every single day when he was in Roanoke, and nobody recruited him. Like I used to go when I was an assistant Hargrave, I would go actually watch him play. And it was me, and it was Roanoke College and Hampton-Sydney were like this 3 schools. So basically a prep school and 2 ODAC schools.
Right.
And nobody else would recruit him. And then him end up being MVP of the Final Four, and obviously winning the championship. Me and my dad went to the game. That was unbelievable. And then the second was probably obviously like Frank Mason winning National Player of the Year, because I had seen the same thing. Everybody that had doubted him and like the hard stuff that people told him he shouldn't go to Kansas because he couldn't play there and all that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of other memories of guys like QJ.
Oh yeah.
Rashard and everything else. But those 2 were like at the elite level. A guy that's, coach a guy that's MVP of the Final Four, and then a guy that was National Player of the Year, that both didn't come in as like a top 5 player in the country. So it wasn't like those guys came in and I was just getting them the ball and rebounding. Those guys both like really put a lot of hours and effort in trying to get to where they were at. So those were two like great memories as coaches too.
Absolutely. I think it's just like anything. It's just seeing that process for anything from the beginning to where they're at now. That's just amazing feeling. So I can definitely attest to that. Speaking about players, who are some players that kind of stand out that you remember that you were playing against, your team was playing against, that you're like, oh my God, it's like, how am I going to stop this guy? Who are some people in person that you say was like a dominant player that was pretty tough for you guys to compete against?
Yeah. So when I was actually playing, Oak Hill had Carmelo Anthony.
Oh, wow.
So that was a bad matchup for us. So obviously he was really good. The best performance, I grew up in Roanoke at the same time JJ was there. So he beat us a couple times. Obviously, he's played 17 years in the league. He's the best shooter I've ever seen live.
Right.
Besides the Currys, obviously, but just even like with him, just every day, like I worked out with him a couple times, stuff, how well he could shoot the ball. Rashard McCants played in North Carolina when he was when they won the national title. He scored like 40 points on us when I was at Hargrave. It was the only game we lost all year at Fort Union. He was at New Hampton. Him and Wes Miller, that's now the coach at UNC Greensboro. They play on the same team, and he was like coming by our bench every play, telling us that we had nobody to guard him, and he scored like 40 on us. So that was bad. And I didn't get much action. We had a guy going to NC State, Wake Forest. They were getting all those reps, but it was he killed us. So that was really good as a player. And then when I first started coaching, Brandon Jennings was at Oak Hill.
Okay. Yep.
We actually beat them, and he scored 53 points on us in the game. So that was just, unreal. Like, we had two. That was a team that actually won the national title and undefeated. He scored 53 in the exhibition game on us, and we won the game. We had no answer for him, obviously. And then I'm trying to think of other guys that are really good. It's been a bunch of them since then. Yeah. When I was coaching, TJ Warren really was good at Brewster when he was there. Brewster's had a bunch of NBA guys. Terry Rozier was good at Hargrave. Montrezl Harrell was really good at Hargrave, so all those guys. In college that year, I don't know if you remember this, but like Duke had Kyle Singler and all those guys were there, and then Kansas had Cole Aldridge and all them. So it was just so many guys. And you go back and you start having these stories, you remember guys that you've seen live, they're actually playing and coaching against a lot of NBA players. Azubuike was when I was in Florida at Elev8, he was down here. So it's been Jonathan Isaac. I coached against him when he was actually at IMG. So it's a lot of bad nights. We won a lot of games. Beat some of those guys though.
Right. No, that's fascinating because I think you hear that a lot, and even from my side, it's different sometimes when you're watching television, where when you're actually in person, just being in there, you just kind of feel that energy, and just like they just seem like they're unstoppable. So I think there's always a difference between seeing things sometimes live and rather than on television and such. If you were to give advice for anyone that wants to get into coaching, that's like brand new to coaching or considering it, what suggestions would you provide advice?
I think it's one thing is you kind of got to realize like what coaching is. You've been around the game, you've seen this. There's so much more to it besides just, drawing up plays and doing workouts. I think you got to try to learn from as many people and connect with as many people as you can early. I thought the best thing that I did is that when I finished playing at Shepherd, I thought about, I actually had a couple opportunities to go be an assistant or like a GA at a Division II in the league, and I would have made more money. But I went to Hargrave and I took less money, but I got to meet so many people. And that led me into obviously being at Radford because they had signed a couple guys at Virginia Tech when obviously Brad was an assistant, Coach Greenberg there. So I think you need to try to connect with as many people and obviously open as many doors. And then just, you got to prove yourself, obviously your work ethic, being able to work guys out on the floor, all that stuff. But I think you need to make as many connections early on as you can and find ways to open doors. And when I was at Hargrave, we had 33 Division I players. So just the amount of contacts that I made those 3 years really helped me obviously get the job at Radford, have a couple interviews, but then I'll be able to parlay that into like AAU connections and be able to recruit players down the road. So that just doesn't mean like, I think everybody says, hey, I want to go meet like Coach A or let's say Coach K or Coach Williams and all that stuff. There's so many valuable people in this business, whether it's, high school coaches, AAU coaches, could be college coaches at all different levels. You look at some of these guys' backgrounds where like Eric Spoelstra was a video guy one time, right? Like John Beilein was a Division II head coach. You just never really know where guys' paths are going to take them. So I think, making those connections, being able to talk to people, and then obviously the lines of nobody like cross, obviously just like this, we're interviewing, 10 years later, so I think, just the more people that in the profession, and then obviously then you got to prove yourself with your work ethic, then obviously your work and just kind of put your head down and keep going. And, don't be worried about, one thing. Not everything's going to go your way, but you just got to keep pushing and, do what you think is best.
No, I think that's great. And I think that really aligns to any type of business is networking. I always kind of remind myself that too. Some people would, like you said, they think of like the big names, like, oh, I need to get that person. I need to get in contact with them. Think about the people that works, with them side by side. There's like you said, a lot of people, they kind of start somewhere, but you never know where they're going to go. So I always try to treat people the same way. If you're a good person, I'm going to treat you like a good person, because just because you're at this level doesn't mean you're not going to bring value. You just never know where paths cross. So I think that's great advice. Speaking about just like networking and kind of the great things you've done so far, what are some, immediate goals that you have in mind, some near term and then some long-term goals for you? Maybe college basketball one day, professional basketball, NBA coach. What's in your vision board?
Yeah, right. Short term right now, we got to try to, we're ranked number 1 in the country right now, and we're 21-0. So short term is we got 6 regular season games and
talking like a coach right now.
Yeah, we're gonna try to win those 6, and then obviously try to win a national title here. It'd be the first one on the post grad side. IMG's won; they've won on the high school side, so that would be exciting. And I've always just really believed this. I know this is like sounds good. A lot of people say this, but I think if you do as good a job as where you're at, then the rest will kind of take care of itself.
Absolutely.
When I was at Massanutten, I never envisioned being the head coach at IMG. Obviously, it's a cool place. It's a great opportunity. Mm-hmm. When I was at Hargrave, I never thought that I would have an opportunity to be on a Division I staff, even as an operations guy like Radford. I just wanted to be like the best I could be there. I think everybody has a dream of being a head Division I basketball coach. I think that's normal for everybody. Mm-hmm. But also, like, I could stay here the rest of my life and be successful. I'm in a great place with a great job and coach great players. I think you just have to kind of let the process work itself out. But I think that's kind of the biggest thing, just for my future. Like, I would love to obviously be a head Division I coach one day. That's everybody's goal. But also very lucky, and I tell people, to me, to grow up thinking I'd be the head coach at IMG on the post grad side, coach all these guys, that's a huge goal as well. So don't take for granted where you're at, and always, I think you can't really only search like to the next job if you're doing a good job where you're at. So that's what I'm trying to do, right now. And then that kind of all, parlays into it. Like, if I prove that I can recruit, really, really good players here, then, somebody might give me a chance to one day to do that somewhere at a unique place. And then if I can really win and be successful here, then it shows that, like, you can maybe win as a head coach at the next level. So I think that's the most important thing. And then hopefully I can continue to build my resume and it'll all kind of work itself out, whatever it's meant to be. So
I think it's working out pretty well, Chad. Coach Chad, I think it's working out pretty well. No, I think it's really fascinating. I mean, like you said, it's crazy. You threw out 10 years. It's been about 10 years. You're right. Just seeing, I think where you're at now is pretty interesting and fascinating, because you're at this level where you're coaching high school athletes, and these are just not the typical athletes. These are like top-notch 4-star, 5-star that's going to eventually go to the NBA more than likely. So I think it's really cool to see where you're at, seeing at the high level, to see them grow, and then eventually most of them do make it to elite. So that's pretty cool. So I don't blame you. I think where you're at is just fine. But I think the aspirations that you share, it's pretty common for any coaches to have in mind. The last question I had, and again, this is kind of like why I put this platform together, is to help inspire the youth and those who don't have the resource, might not have that motivation, that drive to kind of get to that next level, but they have that ability. What advice would you share for youth wanting to play at a top-notch high school level, college level, and then professionally? What are some things you'd share?
Yeah, I think the one thing is you got to be persistent. I think everybody in general right now, I think this is kind of like our culture, right? Everybody wants the easy fix, the easy way. All these guys that we've kind of talked about tonight, it's not been easy for them, and I think that's, kind of, whether if you get into like the Luke and Frank story recently, the Steph Curry. So I think it's continuing to have a plan and have like a real goal. I tell our guys, it's kind of like an ATM machine, right? If you put in like $10 in your bank account, you try to withdraw like 30, it doesn't really work out real well. You get an overdraft charge. So I think that's the same thing. I think it's, you have to put the time, you have to put the energy in, and you got to like take pride in your brand, like everything you do. So, as a coach, people are looking if you sprint back on defense, people are looking if you come off the floor and throw your water bottle, right? People are looking, what type of person you are, like you talked in the community. And it's just real simple. Like, even when we were at Radford and there would be somebody that would come try to interview for another spot with you guys, I would always ask y'all, because I respected your opinion, like what you thought of the person. So I think everybody around you can help you. Never take anybody for granted. You would be shocked how many NBA teams call not just me, but just people on our staff, our strength coaches, our nutritionists, anybody that sees how these guys, were with them. So I think as you're inspiring, you have to really take pride in like your brand, which means like, not only just like the shots you make, the rebounds you have, how you guard, but kind of what you do on and off the floor, how you present yourself, what type of person you are. Because at the end of the day, you got to represent either one of two things. Like if you're at IMG, you got to represent IMG, right? If you're going to Duke or Radford or wherever, you got to represent that university. And eventually you're going to be a professional. Like you see people all the time throwing away money because their brand's not good, they make the wrong decisions. So I think that's very, very important.
Good point.
And I think that's huge. And I think as we all grow, we all learn that. So I try to share like as many real stories as I can with our guys because I want them to be successful of just things that they can do to help themselves. And then I think it's, if you're about the right stuff and you work really hard and you stay consistent and you don't really shortcut it, I think it'll kind of work itself out, and I think you got to find ways. When I was a kid, I had to go to a side place in Roanoke, the Lancelot, and go shoot every day and like rebound for myself sometimes and find ways to get in the gym. And I would work out 2 or 3 times a day. Like everybody can make an excuse, if you can't get in the gym or you can't do this or it's my coach's fault, but you just got to like keep with it, man. You got to like continue to work. You got to continue to compete. And if you go to a Division I school, doesn't mean you're going to the NBA. If you go to Division III school, doesn't mean you can't go to the NBA, So like whatever level you end up at. I mean, we've talked about guys on this podcast that have had, 0 offers, ends up at like MVP of the Final Four. We talked about guys like QJ that is playing professional basketball for money that really only had one offer at VMI, which to me was considered low level Division I at the time. And went in there and had an unbelievable career. So I think it's just a constant, and everybody's timetable and everything is different, but it's the constant, drive, hunger, energy. We're doing this podcast tonight. Like I got another Zoom call with a recruit tonight at 8:45. It's like you got to always work. You got to always try to do something. You got to always try to get better, and then like really pay attention to people you're around and take advice from everybody. I think I'm fortunate because Kevin Keats was my mentor and I worked for him, and he's an NC State. Like I think, we're fortunate, like Coach Greenberg was in the NBA, everything else, like everybody you work with or work for or work with can always give you advice. It doesn't always have to be exactly like what you're going to do, but you can learn something from everybody. So I think that's important too.
No, I like that a lot. I think about just in day life, like a lot of good and the bads. As you give it a couple hours, couple days, couple months, couple years, you kind of reflect on how or why things happen. It kind of formulates and kind of brings you where you're at now today. So I definitely like that a lot, and I definitely agree. Yes. That's what I kind of had in mind, Coach Chad. Is there anything just to kind of close us out? Any final remarks or anything? Any shout outs you want to give? Kind of leave the floor open to you.
Yeah, right. We should give a shout out to B. Jack and Patrick Thornhill for the best staff we had in the country, right? Yeah, Coach,
we did. We had a good team.
Yeah, Cedric Smith, our guy that was with us all the time. All the guys over there at Radford. I'm just obviously thankful to be at IMG. Great place, unbelievable place to be. Thankful for the opportunity here. And then, that's it. Like all the guys, fortunately, we're only a good coach because we got a lot of good players. So I'm fortunate for all these guys that obviously believed in me and the process and what we did and the work. And you've only won this many games, had this many guys sign. If those guys put the work in and effort, so we're going to keep trying to do that. And, thankful for all those guys and obviously family, obviously girlfriend, everybody, everybody was great, so that's always.
Everyone plays a role.
You need the whole village, right? You need the whole village, right? So thankful for all that.
Cool. Well, hey, Coach Chad, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the nuggets that you shared. You've been around a lot of basketball. You were a player at once. You're a mentor to many. You've helped groom a lot of players that's played not only at high levels in college, but overseas in the NBA. So it was a privilege to talk to you, and I'm always rooting for you, sir. And don't forget about us little people as you continue to do big things. So thanks again.
Little man, I'm just trying to keep up with you.
I appreciate it.